You can love someone like unapologetically but not like them. And that same thing goes for yourself.
We see so much of inclusion that we just didn't have.
Some brands that claim to be inclusive stop at a size 20. I'm a 22, 24.
The body positivity movement has been on the rise in the past few years. We've seen more inclusive photo shoots and brands creating clothing and lingerie for women of every size, shape, and color. But is this a movement that's here to stay, or is it just one of those trendy terms in the age of wokeness? Joining us to break all of this down is HuffPost reporter Jamie Feldman, HuffPost Black Voices editor Taryn Finley, and fashion photographer and body positive activist Anastasia Garcia. You describe yourself as one of the founders of this body positivity movement.
I think the body positive movement is just the radical idea that you should love the skin you're in regardless of its size, shape, color, age, ability. It's like recent history, this movement. It's not like there's been a lot of time to define like who originated it and who hasn't. I really have been one of the main people for the last 10 years calling attention to the need for more inclusive imagery. I think as photographers, we have a responsibility to be conscious about the images we create and how they're going to impact the people viewing them. So, especially being a plus size woman myself.
I think a lot of times when we see the body positivity just as a, consumer or as a casual viewer of like whatever fashion, whatever photography, whatever media that we're consuming, a lot of times we only see one type, one face of the body positivity movement, and it's exactly. And usually it's a cis white woman who has a specific kind of body, a specific kind of curves. And that is not body positivity to me. Of course, she should be uplifted and she definitely should have her body validated, exactly. But at the same time, like, what about the rest of us? What about, not only like Black women, what about trans women? What about, when we're talking about body positivity from a women's lens, what about those who are differently able?
Yeah, I mean, what were y'all thinking of Ashley Graham with that? When you said that one person who's kind of become the face, the body.
Honestly, I think, Ashley Graham is a beautiful woman. I've had this conversation with many people. In many ways, she's responsible for a lot of the progress that we've seen.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of the inclusivity that we've seen, a lot of women feel empowered by her to share their own stories on social media. And I think that's where like the true body positivity really is right now, is on social, from women who are just like, I see people that look like me on screen and in print ads and on TV, and so I feel empowered. Even if I don't necessarily look like her, I can look like me and also be worthy.
Plus size models are not plus size women. We need to understand that it needs to be so much more inclusive than just plus size women.
Plus size models have perfect bodies. They're just bigger than the models, the straight size models that we've seen in fashion and on television. So to say, oh, look at us, we've done so well, we are hiring these women that are, look different, sure, like they can't fit into the same size, but they have perfect bodies. So it's not, what are you accomplishing there?
I mean, and the problem, I think, what we just said, it's not just what we see, it's the people behind the scenes making these decisions.
100%.
The industry.
Because these models don't cast themselves.
Right.
And I think that's so like what the average person looking at media doesn't understand is that models don't decide to be in front of the lens. It's people behind the scenes who make the decisions to cast them. And that's why it's so important to make sure that there aren't just diverse bodies in front of the lens, but also behind it. Because you really can't tell an authentic story unless you have someone to speak to it from an authentic place.
Jamie, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the industry itself here. How have they reacted to the social media pressure behind all of this? It's clearly a movement on social media, but we have seen some companies who are a lot resistant to kind of jump on board. Like, what is the reaction from the industry side?
I think it's twofold. On one hand, you've seen that the body positivity movement has encouraged and empowered both people and brands to be more inclusive, both size and, skin tone and anything that you can think of. So you have brands like Loft. Chromat is one that comes to mind that I know Anastasia's worked with a bunch, that has been really size inclusive. And I don't just mean, a plus size brand. I don't just mean like, this is a brand that serves women that are these sizes. That's not inclusive, right? Exactly. A brand that's gonna, go from size 0 to 32, whatever it is, a brand that is all encompassing, that's what really is inclusive to me. On the other hand, it's kind of showed a little bit of brands' true colors. I think especially designer brands that clearly have no interest in catering to women above a certain size.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, this was huge news at the end of last year, of course, with the Victoria's Secret fashion show that came out. Ed Razek told Vogue that he did not see himself casting a plus-size model or a transgender model.
I just want to point out that Victoria's sales have been dropping for years. Right. And I also want to point out that 67% of the women in the United States are a size 14 and up. So like for me, like what does Victoria's Secret not like money? Your sales have been dropping forever and 70% of women can't wear your clothing. So like, let's do the math here, guys. Right. You know, it's like you either want to serve consumers or you don't, regardless of their size. So I just think from a business perspective, like, do you hate money? What is it?
It's
brands.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really dumb, and it really shines a light on, like you were saying earlier, about the gatekeepers and who is making these decisions, who is actually feeding into, and they are quite frankly, they're antiquated. These people are not with the times. They don't understand the importance of including everybody, not only just from a moral perspective, but like you said, from a business perspective.
Right. They don't care.
They don't care at all, and they don't try to care. What the Victoria's Secret exec was talking about was essentially just ignoring a whole population and trying to take away the agency, trying to take away the validity of their bodies and trying to make them feel less than. And that is the issue that I had with that, more so because I was never shopping at Victoria's Secret from jump.
Never.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't. I mean, they have such
school.
they have such
Exactly.
well, and here's the thing too, since high school, Victoria's Secret used to be the only place you'd go in the mall. Unless you were going to go to Nordstrom or Macy's like your mom did.
But it's 2019. No one wants to smell like Love Spell all the time.
Oh my
I'm
God.
good,
That
actually.
purple one, I loved that.
I never did like that.
I was 12 and tacky. Loved it.
Yeah. You could smell me from a mile away.
Yeah.
But it's so problematic that like you associate Victoria's Secret with being a teenager, because your teenage body is just not your woman body. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like, but even me I couldn't shop at Victoria's Secret as a teenager. Like the only option for me was like, super high cut, because it was the only thing that fit. You know, it's ridiculous.
Do you feel now that there are more options for you though?
I think there are more options. Do I think there are enough? Do I think there are as many as there should be? Absolutely not. I still buy all of my underwear at Lane Bryant, which is great. They're a fantastic company, but I would love to branch out and try other things, but there just really isn't that option for me. Some brands that claim to be inclusive stop at a size 20. I'm a 22, 24. And so it's like, even some brands that are like, we're a plus size, it's like, no, you're not.
Not to mention when they say that they're expanding their sizing, or they say that they go up to a certain size, those are not accurate sizes. We can say that we're doing it, and we can put a plus girl in our ad campaign in a size that we don't even carry.
I can think of 2 companies off the jump who did that. Yeah. Companies that claim to be representing real, but they don't go past a size 16. And it's like, oh, is everyone who's not a size 16, are they not real?
Not exactly.
What does that mean?
So I guess this just goes back to like the responsibility of brands, because at the end of the day, a brand is in the money-making business, except Victoria's Secret. We've already established that.
They don't like money.
They don't like money. Yeah, but
business.
all of these other newer, companies that have popped up, Third Love, and and things like that, they are in the money-making business. That's their thing. Do they have a responsibility? Is it just good business? Do they have a brand? Like, are they at fault for deciding that this is what we're going to do from a manufacturing standpoint, plus from the social media standpoint?
I do believe that brands have a responsibility, but I think that media creators have the larger responsibility, because the brands are taking cues from the media. People look to media to understand how they fit into the world or how they don't, because what we show in media is what we as a culture decide is normal. And brands are going to also be subscribing to the same ideas. Is this normal or is this not?
There's so much that has to be dismantled.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
I mean, but it's like, it brings us full circle back to the people behind the scenes who are making these decisions.
There's a whole ecosystem at play, right, when we talk about whose responsibility it is, because yes, it is fashion media's responsibility. It's definitely the fashion makers, all these gatekeepers, but also I just remember looking at all of these things, the stick figures and the people with long hair, all these things that I didn't have as a young girl, and that really in my formative years, that really played a part into how I viewed myself. Absolutely. And a lot of these things I didn't unlearn until literally like 3 years ago. Things that I'm still trying to unpack. And, you know, before the panel, we were talking about how, you know, how our mothers, how our families like really play a part in how we view ourselves. Because there's one thing that we talk about in the body positivity movement. There's self-love, but also like, do you like yourself? Mm-hmm. Do you like who you are? Do you like what you look like? Because you can love someone like unapologetically, but not like them. And that same thing goes for yourself, right. You know? And not so true. Of course, and not blaming anyone, but of course, like, there's some self-reflection that needs to go on, and there's some fostering within the household, fostering within communities, within your friend groups, within all of these things that, you know, play into.
By ourselves and by our friends, and you look so thin as a compliment.
I think of that Mean Girls scene, you know, where they're in the mirror and they're all like dissecting themselves. It's like, that's funny because it's true. Like, how often are you in the bathroom with your girlfriends and you're like, oh my God, I look like today, or whatever it is, you know? It's so normal that we don't even stop to like be like, what are we doing? What are we saying? We don't realize how powerful our words are. And we almost, you know, maybe not us, but I think historically we have encouraged that behavior in each other. And that's dangerous. And it's completely contributing to the way we feel about ourselves.
And going back again to like the media and advertising, the money-making business, they know those fears, and they're just gonna throw them at you. They tap into them, so you buy the skinny tea, so you buy, you know, the lingerie from Victoria's Secret.
So you're constantly trying to achieve something that you are not, because then you were constantly spending money.
But it's also so wild to me because you've seen so much success with brands that have been body positive. I mean, you can just look at Savage Fenty as an example, right? Like,
and Chromat.
And Chromat. That's like the epitome of self-love, that runway, right? All different shapes and sizes, all different skin colors, ages. It was gender identities. It was so impactful, and the sales reflect that. So it always boggles my mind, especially with designers. We were talking a little bit about designer clothing, that people don't want to tap into that because it's constantly worthwhile from a business point. Yeah.
Women who have been, men who have been subscribing to this idea aren't going to then think like, oh, we should celebrate this large body, because they personally don't subscribe to those politics.
And by the way, even I've been reporting on body positivity and self-love and preaching the importance of it for the past 5 years in my work at HuffPost, and I constantly deal with self-hatred and the things that I've had to unlearn about myself, and every day I'm like, oh, how's my body look? And I have to kind of take a step back and be like, this is a construct, like this is so crazy.
I think it's important to acknowledge too that body positivity and self-love, it's a practice. It's not like this destination that you arrive at where you're like, just all of a sudden you're like, I am perfect, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say it's too late for us necessarily, because I don't believe that, but I think that we do this work not just for us, but for the girls now. You know what I mean? We're trying to help lessen that programming for them.
I think about everything that we didn't have when we're around the same age, and like literally Victoria's Secret was pretty much it. 21, if you're asking.
Yeah.
No, but the social media wasn't around back then. In some ways, that's a great thing that we got to grow up without that, but in other ways, like, we see so much of inclusion that we just didn't have. How do we make this go from just this movement to staying power?
I think it's about that practice. When you are repeating the same message over and over again, you feel like, okay, I've said this already. But the thing that we need to understand is these bubbles that we exist in. And just because we're screaming at the top of our lungs about something doesn't mean that it's permeating out of our circle. And I think we all need to be conscious about what are we creating, who are we casting, and who are we hiring? Because that's the only way, by putting people in place who can speak to those realities, it's the only way we can continue the work, you know?
I mean, mic drop, right? Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you. This is a great conversation.
Thanks, guys.